The Jeffrey Epstein cover-up. We've all seen the news recently, and it seems to confirm our worst suspicions about who Jeffrey Epstein was, who he was involved with, who he was working for. It seems to confirm our worst suspicions about our political class. But beyond exposing what really is going on in our country, what's really going on behind the scenes, this scandal also exposes something else, something deeply symbolic, something of religious proportions. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to show how what I talk about on this channel ties directly into the real world, directly into politics, directly into how our world is run and why it is so dysfunctional. I believe that there are three basic attitudes which one can take towards life, and that these three attitudes inform all religion, all politics, all morality, all theology. And fundamentally, they are all rooted in the very nature of biological life, what life is, and therefore what we are, what man is. What really is life on the most fundamental level? It is something which grows and which actively seeks out growth, right? Rocks do not do this. Rocks don't grow. They might grow from accumulating minerals, but all life, from man to trees, plants, animals, they seek out growth actively. And this growth necessitates consumption. In order to grow, an organism must eat. In order to sustain itself, an organism must eat. And it has to eat other life forms. We can't eat rocks. We have to eat plants, animals, other living things. And this is the fundamental, horrific fact of life. Man must kill. Man must devour flesh. Think about that. You have to devour something which is alive in order to live and in order to grow. If you want to get big in the gym, you have to slaughter innocent chickens and eat them. Or you could try to go vegan, which is much harder, but still you're eating a living thing. You're eating plants. And we are designed to eat other animals. If you're going to be vegan, you have to do a lot of workarounds, supplementation. So still there's that fundamental, horrific fact that we are designed to kill, to consume flesh. And all the good things which come in life, beauty, vitality, children, they all rest on this fact. None of that could exist if we did not consume nutrients. And I believe that all religion, all morality is a response to this basic reality. So now let's look at three examples. The ancient religion of the Carthaginians and Canaanites, the pagan religion of the Greeks and of European peoples more broadly, and Christianity. And you'll see how all of this relates to Epstein in a minute. The ancient Phoenicians, Canaanites, Carthaginians, and Israelites were all very closely related Semitic peoples. The Canaanites kind of birthed all these people. The Israelites split off from the Canaanites. The Phoenicians had a kind of coastal marine empire in the Mediterranean, and they set up Carthage, the civilization which would compete with Rome for domination of the Mediterranean. And we have both classical and biblical sources accusing this people group of child sacrifice. The Romans accused the Carthaginians of child sacrifice, and the Israelites accused the Canaanites of child sacrifice. There are countless references to this throughout the Bible, and recently it seems that archaeology has confirmed that the Carthaginians were sacrificing children to their gods. They found basically a bunch of infant bones along with votive offerings at a sacrificial site. So all of this comes together to give us a pretty grim picture. And ultimately, this is the source of the idea that the elites in America are eating children or drinking the blood of children. You'll hear people talk about the god Moloch, an owl god, but that's actually a later thing. I believe Moloch originally just meant Lord. And they would have been sacrificing these children to their bull god, Baal. Now, why on earth would anyone do this? What is the logic here? Again, all peoples would have observed that in nature there's this basic giving and taking reciprocal structure. In order to grow, you need to eat. This is why all ancient peoples would sacrifice to their gods. The European pagans would sacrifice animals. This was very important to their religion, and by doing so, they would feed the gods with the fumes of the animals, and they'd also feed themselves because they'd partake in eating the animals as well. And so they'd feed the gods, nourish the gods, they'd give something to the gods in exchange for their blessings and favors. And I think you could see how this logic could easily be taken a step further. In order to appease our God or gain a favor from our God, we must give what is most precious to us. Jordan Peterson actually talks about this all the time. You have to sacrifice what is most precious to you in order to gain something. Christ himself is symbolically a child sacrifice, of course, in a different context. The Carthaginian religion is rooted in an observation of nature fundamentally, but what it does is places the devouring aspect of nature as the highest God. The appetite, the devouring, hungering appetite of life which must be satiated. So now you can see why people accuse the American elites of worshiping Moloch, of cannibalizing children. Even if this isn't literally happening, it is happening in a broad symbolic sense, and it happens whenever there is a corrupt elite which devours its people rather than feeding and protecting them, as is the proper role of the king. So when you look at what's happening in our society on a symbolic level, it's no surprise that a kind of child devouring, which is what Epstein was doing, was literally taking place in the most elite echelons of our society. Jeffrey Epstein is broadly symbolic of our elites. Jeffrey Epstein is broadly symbolic of the corrupt structure of American society and American elites. As an individual, he held his appetites, his base hunger as his highest God, a God which must be served, which must be satiated. He set up his entire life in order to satiate his lust and to symbolically devour children. And of course, lust and hunger are very closely related as instincts. They're both kind of in the lower region of the body, and we often use eating metaphors for sex and for lust. These are the two fundamental consumptive instincts, some of our most powerful and fundamental instincts. And of course, these instincts are not bad in themselves. We need to eat in order to grow. And sex creates life. Sex creates children. Lust causes us to pursue beautiful women and to procreate. And children need to eat in order to grow. They need to eat healthy food, to drink milk. These instincts in themselves are not bad. They actually point us towards what is good. They point us towards life. But when you place the devouring aspect of nature and of human nature as the highest God, as the highest value, then life begins to devour itself. Life is devoured as soon as it's born. A God eats his people's children, and elite devour their own people. So the Epstein cover-up is not just important because of its political and maybe even geopolitical implications, but because it is more broadly symbolic of what is going on under the surface of our society. He has both literally and symbolically exposed our elite. Now back to my original claim that there are three basic attitudes towards life. Christianity presents us with a different perspective. But in order to understand Christianity, we first have to look at the Old Testament religion out of which Christianity sprung. The Israelites were genetically related to the Canaanites and the Phoenicians. They would have genetically basically been the same people. And they used to worship the same Canaanite gods, El, Baal, Asherah. In Genesis, God is still called El. Names like Israel, Samuel, Michael, Gabriel, Daniel all have El in them, and he would have been the supreme father god of the Canaanites. You also have names like Ishbal and Meribal and Baal-Hanan, which have Baal in them, who would have again been this bull god, who would have been kind of like a storm god perhaps, and he is the one who the Carthaginians were sacrificing children to. And then there's also Asherah, who may have been involved in this Carthaginian cult of child sacrifice. She was a female deity, and we might see her name in the names Asher and Asherah from the Old Testament. But the Israelites rejected these gods when Yahweh hit the scene, which seems to have happened when the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed. Yahweh seems like he was probably a southern cult. And so the reason why we see different sources in the Old Testament is probably because the refugees from the northern kingdom fled to the south, and they combined their traditions into this one core text, and there might have been some struggles involved in there. In the north, they might have still been worshiping Baal and El, and hence you see this struggle between the old gods and this new god Yahweh, and then in many ways an integration between these two systems and these sets of deities in the Old Testament. Notice how when Moses goes to the mountain, the people go back to worshiping a golden calf, who probably represented Baal. The story of Isaac and Abraham may be related to this as well, where God at the last minute prevents Abraham from sacrificing his child Isaac, although that's maybe a little bit less certain since you have similar Greek myths as well. But the Bible is filled with passages which condemn Canaanite child sacrifice. Now, Christianity, of course, is an outgrowth of the Old Testament religion with some later pagan injections. And what exactly is Jesus on the cross? He is the Son of God being sacrificed to God. He is a child being sacrificed to God. Jesus is the image of the suffering of innocence, of the suffering child, the sacrificed child, the most holy thing crucified. But the message of Christianity seems to be somewhat opposite to what we can glean from the Carthaginian religion, which makes sense since the Old Testament religion largely developed in reaction to the Canaanite religion. Christianity extols the downtrodden, the innocent, who will be raised up in heaven, while the conquerors, the persecutors, the devourers on earth will be burned in eternity in hell. The feeling you get when looking at the crucifixion, when contemplating the crucified Christ, should be similar to the feeling you would get watching a baby gazelle, which can barely walk, which was just born into this world, torn apart by lions while it is still alive. So you can see what's going on here. At the center of Christianity is horror at the fundamentally cruel, devouring world of nature, and the conviction that it must be wrong, that nature must be fallen and corrupted, and that one day it will be restored to a state without conflict, without devouring. The lion will lay down with the lamb. In the next life, those who suffered in this life, those who were devoured, tormented, oppressed, tortured, will be raised up. The baby gazelle, Jesus on the cross, and those who conquered, who persecuted, like the Romans, will be punished. There will be a kind of cosmic karma, a kind of cosmic balancing. So you can see that this is a rationalization of life. What else could justify the horror of the innocent being devoured? So while the first reaction to life, which we looked at, was to place the devouring aspect as the highest God and to indulge it fully, Christianity recoils from this devouring aspect. The appetites, sexuality, and hunger are condemned as being earthly and corrupt. They take on a purely functional role. This is how the ascetic ideal is born, the ideal of the monk. You should become chaste or only have sex to procreate. You should fast or eat only to sustain yourself. In the Middle Ages, some Christian ascetics would actually starve themselves to death. Early on, some Christians would castrate themselves, and the Catholic Church actually had to ban this. That's how common it was. Now, I think that the problem with this attitude, and all similar attitudes like veganism, many forms of leftism, is that they restrict life by condemning life. This was Nietzsche's complaint about Christianity. Yes, the devouring element of the world is horrifying, and it is highly destructive when it rules. But without consumption, there can be no growth. We have to have lust in order to procreate, in order to give birth to life. That's the ultimate affirmation of life, and we have to eat in order to live. This is why Nietzsche calls Christianity the longing for nothingness. This is why he calls it nihilistic, because it longs to erase the devouring element of nature and of human nature, to make the lion lay down with the lamb, to raise the dead and give them immortality. And while this may seem appealing, if this actually happened, it would destroy life itself. It is a longing to remove life's struggle against death, to make it so that we can have all the good things in life without any consumption, without any type of conflict. But ultimately, consumption, conflict is fundamental to life and the way life works, reproducing itself again and again, generation upon generation, in spite of death. Now, the third approach to life is the European pagan view, and I'm specifically going to look at the one seen among the ancient Greeks. In one of the most foundational Greek myths, Zeus overthrows Kronos, the devouring god who is eating his own children. Zeus then takes the throne, ruling as the daylight father, instating cosmic order. And all men strive towards Zeus, towards the light of the sky, and they obey his laws. Zeus therefore represents the growing, striving element of life. Excellence, beauty, nobility, youth, vitality, all those things in life which strive relentlessly upwards. And Juno and Jupiter may actually be related to our words for youth. So youth, the idea of youth, and Jupiter, the Deus Pater, the daylight father, may actually be related. You see a similar thing going on with Theseus overthrowing the Minotaur, who was being fed Athenian youths. He was devouring Athenian youths, and he of course is half bull, half man. So this myth might reflect some kind of ancient contact with Phoenician culture or its outgrowths, although there's no way to be sure of that. But either way, the same thing is happening. The youthful hero is overthrowing the devouring god. So the idea here is that the growing, the striving element of life should be on top, and the devouring element should be subjugated, not eradicated, but it should serve growth and striving. So we see that the ancient Greek view is very directly addressing this problem of consumption and growth. In the Iliad and Odyssey, we see very clearly that man is comprised of two primary instincts: growth, which manifests in man as a striving for excellence and glory, and consumption, which manifests as man's lower instincts, that is, his appetites. This is a kind of spatial metaphor, right? Your loins and your belly are lower on the body than your chest and your mind. And so the lower elements should feed the higher elements, should feed your courage, your striving for excellence, your striving for beautiful women, for glory, for life. In Homer, we also see that the default state of the natural world, that is the world outside of Zeus's customs and laws, is a state of all devouring, where everything is trying to eat everything else, which is literally what's going on in nature. Every organism is trying to excel, every organism is competing to survive, and in doing so, they are devouring and killing other organisms. This is exactly the world which Odysseus experiences at sea when he shows up at the cave of Polyphemus, the Cyclops, and he asks to be treated as a guest, and Polyphemus says, "I don't obey the laws of Zeus. I'm going to eat you guys." So the point of Zeus's laws are to order nature, to encourage striving, excellence, and growth, to order the lower instincts. In the Greek view, men should relentlessly pursue excellence and the light of glory, just as trees strive and reach for the sky, and they should do so in an ordered and disciplined fashion. It is this order and discipline that are the laws of the Sky Father, of Zeus, and which keep society from devolving into the natural state of the war of all against all. You can never achieve your body's most beautiful and excellent form without disciplined training, and the same is true with virtue and one's character. To max out your body's growth, its vitality, its beauty, you have to go to the gym in a disciplined manner over and over again, and you have to order your lower instincts. You might want to be lazy, you might want to stay inside, you might want to just overeat. You have to resist that and subjugate those instincts so that you eat in order to grow. You eat healthy food, which helps you become vital, which helps your body grow. This, in my opinion, is clearly the correct approach to life. We should not shrink away from it, nor should we indulge the devouring element of nature. Instead, we should seek to embrace, wrestle with, discipline, and direct nature towards the higher. Right now, all Western countries are ruled by a devouring god. We see it with Epstein, but we also just see it more broadly with the elite and the older generations sacrificing the younger generations with things like mass migration. Right now, the youth of the West are being sacrificed to the old devouring elite, to the devouring god. The West is devouring its own children. This is the improper configuration of the world, which is continually overturned, overthrown in European pagan myth. Again, we see this in the myth of Kronos, the myth of the Minotaur, but also in Penelope's suitors conspiring to kill the young prince Telemachus. in Romulus and Remus's father being deposed until they take back the throne, in Volsung being treacherously murdered, Aslog made to live as a peasant. There are endless examples. All of these myths are about the proper ancestral chain of life, where life and vitality is passed from the older generation to the new generation, being disrupted by a devouring god or a devouring king, and then about the subsequent toppling of that devouring god or king and the restoration of the rightful king to his throne, and with him the Sky Father, the cosmic order, to his throne in the heavens. This is our great task. The devouring god must be killed. The Sky Father must be restored to his throne in the heavens. Right now, we are like the young Telemachus, with the suitors in our home conspiring against us, devouring our wealth, wondering if our father will ever return. We are like Romulus and Remus in the wilderness, with an illegitimate king ruling our city. We are like Sigmund, with his father and his brothers killed, hiding out in the woods, waiting to take revenge. But it is this wilderness which hardens us, which acquaints us again with our nature, and which prepares us for the task ahead.
If you're interested in learning about the worldview of the ancient pagan cultures of Europe, the ARC's Heroic Literature course is linked in the description.